Good afternoon, City of Port Aransas, or good morning, actually. Today we have Bill Baker. He's a special guest today, and he'll be talking to us about beekeeping. He's an experienced beekeeper from Central Illinois, and is actually a 10-year Port A winter Texan. And he's been keeping honeybees for 12 years. And is the past president of the Heart of Illinois Beekeepers Association. And he also served as central director for the Illinois State Beekeepers Association. He has 6 hives, which he uses to pollinate pumpkins and to produce honey for commercial sale at farm-to-market shops. And Bill and his wife have also attended several national beekeeping conventions, including one in Galveston that eventually brought him to Port A for the first time. So if you're ready, Bill, go ahead.
So thank you, folks. I'd like to talk to you about beekeepers, honeybees, and your food source. Honeybees are the only insect that actually give us food. There's about 115 to 120,000 beekeepers total. In Illinois, which I have more connections to, has about 4,000 registered with the Department of Agriculture. They actually have a special group for honeybees and pollinators. 5,000 apiaries and about 28,000 colonies or individual boxes. When I started 12 years ago, there were 60 people in the Peoria Heart of Illinois Beekeepers, and 12 years later, there's 190. So it is a growing hobby. The types of beekeepers, they're basically break down into 3 different groups. There are large professional beekeepers that have 300 or more hives. The biggest guy's got about 100,000. Most of them have 800 or 2,000. They are mostly used to pollinate things. They take them to North Dakota and they work in the hay fields there. Then they take them out to almonds in California. They take them down to citrus plants in Florida. They take them back up to Maine for cranberries and blueberries. A lot of them are used in apples, pumpkins, and squash. The next level of beekeepers are serious sideliners or people that are in it for the actual business of it. And that bounces from 25 to 300 hives or more. Some use it for pollination, but most of them are for honey production and produce thousands and thousands of pounds of honey. Then there's the other group, which is the largest. That's guys like me, the hobbyists. We're the largest group. We have most of the time between 1 and 20 hives, mostly for honey and beeswax and those type of things. Many of them only for personal consumption. A few of them are for a little more into commercial use of selling honey and that sort of thing. And this number is growing quite rapidly. So this is what a pollinator is loading a truck to be moved from the field they're in to pollinating either citrus or almonds or so. There's about 10 million bees on each one of these trucks. There's how they look them at, they stack them, and they're sitting all over there. In California, there's about 100 million almond trees, and it takes about 31 billion bees to pollinate them. So you can see them all lined up down the road. This is what a cranberry field looks like. Cranberries also require honeybees to be pollinated, and it takes thousands and thousands of hives of honeybees to pollinate the cranberries that you get. But even in industry like this, it doesn't always go the way you want. So this is what a truck wreck looks like. So as you can see, there's honeybee boxes busted up all over. And so each one of these boxes in here, and there's 4 to a pallet, has 1 queen bee in it. And each one of these has a queen bee in it, and those bees want to go back to that same box and that same queen bee. So, as you can see from this fella, he's carrying a few with him. There will be honeybees loose here for days looking for their hive to go back into. So, this is a real disaster. But I had my own. I had my, this is my pollinator box, a trailer that I use to take the pumpkin field. And on a really hot day in Illinois with a little bit of wind, this beehive fell over and knocked over this beehive because it got so warm that the propolis melted. So none of my bees were extremely pleased that day. So how much honey is made in the world? In the world, about 1.65 million tons. And China being the biggest producer. In the United States, we make about 81,000 tons in 2016. Some of the numbers are hard to get because of the things we're going through. We were third in the world in that time with 2.7 million colonies. Number two is either Vietnam or Turkey, and they kind of switch back and forth. There's enough honey made in the United States to fill up 20 swimming pools, Olympic size. In one hive, USA average was about 58 pounds. In Texas, in 2017, Texas produced almost 8 million pounds of honey. That's a lot of honey. So let's talk a little bit about apiary. Each one of these individual boxes is a colony, and it has one queen bee in it, and it has 20 to 60,000 female worker bees and a couple hundred male drones. Apiary is a location that has 3 or more honey colonies in it. So, but you don't have to have a box to grow bees. They've been around for 500,000 years, and they work perfectly well in trees and a variety of other places. When humans started domesticating bees, they used skep, and it was made out of wound up pieces of straw. Now, the only difficulty of that is it had the same kind of comb inside, and the only way to get the honey out was to destroy the hive. So you had to tear out the hive from the bottom. And, that destroyed, many times killed all the bees and killed the queen, and that stopped the hive. This is actually a picture of my apiary, or one of my apiaries, and this is my youngest son working on it. We have this located next to our house, and you can see the bees down at the bottom going in and out while he's working on it. This is a foreign bee house that they're held in many places like Vietnam and Turkey and things of that sort. And they can have hundreds of beehives in one building that they work on the beehives from the backside. But they don't really need a box. You can see they can make a really nice big honeycomb in a lot of places, including places you really don't want them to be in. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about this for a moment. In nature, as you can see, no matter where they're at, they pretty well perform equally. And so this led to an observation by a guy named Langstroth that he noticed that this space between these two leaves of honeycomb was pretty consistent. And so he started studying it, and what he discovered was that the bees will always make a space that allowed a bee on one side of this honeycomb to be working while another one on the other side is working. So he turned that bee space, and he calculated and figured out how much it was, and he created the modern hardware that we have for beekeeping. This is called a Langstroth Hive. It has removable frames inside it. There are a couple versions of it. There are 10 frame widths, and there are 8 frame widths. There's also a hiveless version that is a flat, we'll talk about. But this bottom box is used for growing new bees and storing up some honey to feed them. The second box is used for growing more bees. When she fills this up, we'll talk about that cycle in a moment. then there's a queen excluder to keep her from laying eggs up here. And this section right up here with a medium super for honey is where we collect the honey that we process for humans. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So this is what it looks like. There are individual removable hive boxes or frames that we can pull out and inspect the bees and help them work with them. And then these would hold the honey that a human being that we take and cut the caps off, spin it out, and sell that to humans or use it for human consumption. The top cover and boxes is to keep the rain and the various things out. The bottom one is to get them up off the ground and to allow them a little bit of space so that they can get some ventilation. A full-grown bee. This is what the brood box is showing. There is eggs in this one. This is a larva that's just getting developed, and it is in royal jelly for 3 days. You can see various versions of them. And these are larvae that are much larger, not quite to the 8th day, because on the 8th or 9th day, they get a capping, and they start to mutate into an actual bee. This looks different than this is the actual honey that's in the upper super. The brown area down here is where the honey is laying against it, and the little white spot is an air bubble. Here is more honey being made, but it hasn't been dried out yet. The bees know that they can't cap it until it gets under 18% moisture rate, otherwise it will ferment. So it has to be dried to a certain level before they can cap it. So there's more. This is open brood, cap brood. They have pollen and honey close by so that they can create the food to feed themselves and to feed the larva as the larva is being, as it grows. Sometimes when you open up a beehive, this is what you see. Lots and lots of bees up at the top. When you see all these little heads and faces looking at you, you know you need to be either real happy and calm with them or spray them with some sugar water, which I use instead of smoke, because it's like the sugar water kind of calms them down because it's really like a nectar that they're going to look for. Here's the 3 different sizes of bees. This is the queen bee. She's much larger in length and width than the standard bee. This is the drone, who's a male bee. You can recognize him by the wide, short body and the huge eyes. His job is to pick out a virgin queen flying through what's called a drone cloud with those huge eyes so that they can mate. This is a standard female worker bee. She's considerably shorter than the queen bee. You can recognize her because her wings are almost longer than her body, whereas the queen's wings are very, very short. She only uses them for first flight, and then she stays in it. After she's mated, she stays in the hive for the rest of her life. On the inside, the young bees, within the first 2 weeks, can actually produce wax for the honeycomb. I was able to find this picture after hours of searching, and I thought it was a really cool picture that they create the wax with an internal organ that eventually doesn't work anymore because their body becomes too solid and too hard. And they secrete it through the platelets in the bottom of their body, and another bee will take it, and they will start to process it in their biting mouth parts. Bees have 2 actual mouth parts. The sucking mouth part for drawing nectar from a flower, and a biting mouth part that is used to chew up and create the actual hive honeycomb with the wax that's produced by the younger bees. I have Russian bees, full-blown Russian bees, is what I use for my type of bees. And there are many different types of bees. And when you're working with them, if you're slightly irritating them, they will bite me. I can actually feel them biting my fingers and my wrist. But if you push them too far, they will actually sting you. But we'll talk about that much later. But when they're first just slightly irritated, they will bite. It's kind of an amazing little thing. So the queen bee, she's always fed royal jelly. Her only job is to lay eggs. She lays 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day, day and night. The inside of the hive is almost dark, completely dark. A very small amount of light comes in the bottom. The queen bee can live several years, 6 to 8 years. Many beekeepers trade the queen bee out every year, thinking that a fresh queen bee would have more vitality and more ability to lay stronger, more vibrant eggs. Sometimes if you have a hot hive that is very aggressive, if you change the queen bee in about 20 days, the hive can calm down. But it takes about 20 days for the new worker bees to be generated out. I've had to do that a couple of times with a queen that was very aggressive, raised very aggressive brood. So over here you can see eggs in the bottom of these little honeycomb cells, and then you can see larvae and laying in royal jelly, and then this shows the egg that is a well-developed larva just about being clapped off. Here's a bee that's gone through the eyes are one of the most prominent things that show up early. This one has a mite already on it. That's a varroa mite we'll talk about soon. The queen has the shortest gestation. From everybody gets royal jelly for 3 days, and then the queen gets it for the rest of her life, and she will come out of the cell in 16 days. The worker bees go through the same first 3 days, and then they are fed bee bread, which is a mixture of pollen and honey, until it's capped on the 9th day, and then they generate and come out on the 22nd day. The drone bee, which is much larger, has the same 3-day start. He gets capped on about the 10th or 11th day because it takes him a little longer. And then he comes out on the 24th or 25th day of the pupa. So it's much longer for the drone bee to be produced. There's only 200 drones. They can go to any hive around. All the other bees are connected to the queen by a pheromone, and they only go back to their own hive for most of the general rule. So life cycle for a bee, most people don't know this, but a bee will only live, a worker bee only lives about 36 to 40 days. So when they emerge, the first thing they do is they clean out their cell that they grew in, that they mutated into. And they clean that out and they start working on cleaning the honeycomb and feeding larvae. Then they start working on building the honeycomb. They generate the wax and they work together to create the wax. When that wax is first made out of that pure white wax that they make, the beeswax, it is just gorgeously pure white. I mean, it's amazing. So then they start receiving the food from the foragers, and they use it either to feed the larva down on the bottom, or they use it to start making it into honey for us. Then they can graduate to be a guard bees. Down at the bottom of a beehive, there's always guard bees protecting and smelling the bees that come in to prevent other bees from coming in and robbing the hive of its resources, which can happen when one hive gets very weak and they have a strong hive close by. The strong hive will try to overpower the small hive and go in and steal the honey and the pollen. The queen bee lays 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day. So after she gets the hive built up to 50 or 60,000 bees, and those bees are out active doing foraging, it stands to reason that 1,500 to 2,000 bees a day die every day. So for about 3 weeks, they go out and fly for nectar, pollen, water, and sap, tree sap. University of Illinois has a big pollinarium that they studied and marked all the bees for 12 or 15 days in a row. And each day they got a different dot, and they had it so they had to go out on a special little thing so they could mark them and count them. And they discovered that thousands of bees would go out on the first day, and by the 12th day, there wouldn't be any of the ones that came out on the first day during the study still alive. They either died out in the field or died inside the hive and were thrown out. So after several weeks of studying this, they basically determined that the bees that are out in the field actually fly themselves to death. Their wings just wear out and they don't come back, or they get attacked by a variety of birds that eat them, or yellow jackets or other wasps. So determined that they die 5 to 7 weeks after being hatched. The only exception to this is during the winter. In the fall, there's a group of bees that are born that live through the winter up north. I don't know about here in Texas, but they don't fly at less than 45 degrees weather and temperature. So they stay in a winter over, keep the hive warm, to keep the queen fed, and to move through all the honey resources they have for their food source. So bees forage for nectar, pollen, and water, and tree sap. So you can see the pollen basket on this particular bee. Pollen basket on that particular bee is carrying a lot of pollen. This bee has got water and pollen on it, and so is bringing back. The other thing they collect is they collect tree sap. They get sap from trees, and they use it to create a thing called propolis, which we'll talk about soon. So the products of the hive, of course, we all know about honey. It was the first sweetener that humans were able to get. They didn't have processed sugar from sugar cane or from sugar beets in the olden days. So honey has been found in ancient pyramids, and it has been in cave drawings going back thousands of years. They knew that the only method for sweetener was honey at that time. So the other thing is beeswax. Beeswax is a very beneficial product from the hive. It's used for a variety of things and a lot of furniture polish and things of that sort.